What if the story we've been told about illness, that it's caused by germs, fixed by drugs, and diagnosed by authorities, is fundamentally incomplete? What if your beliefs, emotions, and consciousness are just as powerful as any prescriptions? Today's guest is Dawn Lester, a researcher and co-author who spent decades investigating the foundations of modern medicine after her own cancer diagnosis led her to question everything. She discovered that healing required more than treating symptoms. It demanded addressing the mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions that conventional medicine ignores. In this conversation, you'll learn how to reclaim sovereignty over your health decisions, why the burden of proof matters when evaluating medical claims, and how suppressed emotions literally manifest as physical symptoms. Dawn will walk you through the logical fallacies embedded in mainstream health narratives and show you practical ways to listen to your body's intelligence. Whether you're dealing with chronic illness or simply want to think more critically about health, this episode will fundamentally shift how you see the relationship between consciousness and the body. Let's dive in. Dawn, lovely to see you again.
Lovely to see you. Thank you for inviting me to have another conversation with you.
It's always a pleasure. I've got a whole stack of questions I'd really like to ask you, if I may.
Absolutely.
Okay, so number one, you shifted from intense scientific research to focusing on consciousness and inner work. Now, I know the shift actually happened a long time back, but more in your public persona, if you will. What's the critical piece of information that convinced you that the ultimate cause of illness wasn't just physical toxins or deficiency, but a compromised spiritual or mental state?
Well, I mean, the first point was for me during the mid 1990s when I had the cancer diagnosis, because something somewhere said to me, intuitively, whatever it was, something came to me or just I felt that it was something to do with my mindset, my approach, rather than anything physical. And it was something to do with making changes. Now, that included things I was actually doing, actions, products I use, food I ate, that kind of thing. I also knew it was something to do with my approach, because I, not particularly happy now. It's like, come on, just, pull, your, pull yourself together, get on with it. It was something to do with that. So that was the start. Then moved into understanding, sort of looking at the nature of reality and getting some grounding in what reality is and who we are and consciousness in many cases it was a kind of knowing, coming to consciousness or coming to my conscious awareness. And then when we started looking at the health side of things, it was looking at the information from a place of not fear but helping provide information. So there was, within that, it was still knowing it was to do with the approach. And one of the factors that we talk about in What Really Makes You Ill is stress, although that's a limiting label for something that's bigger than that, but it does include the stresses that we experience. So it's emotional stresses as well. So that was part of it. So it's been a journey. So I can't say it was a critical piece of information, although I think coming across the book Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton, that was probably a key piece to see, oh, right, yeah, there's some evidence, if you like, because of his work. He was approaching it scientifically, not from a kind of woo sense, sort of spiritual sense. He was approaching, even though he's like blending the two, but it was still a practical. So I think that part did give confirmation of, there's definitely something to do with our beliefs, and there is a definite connection with how, if you like, our thoughts, our beliefs, everything that we put into our lives is will affect our body. So I think that was a key piece. So that I suppose that was the I don't know about critical, but it was a pretty important piece of the puzzle that then led to the next stages of looking at, um, the actual medical system. Um,
Okay. All right. So, what did it feel like to choose, a more unconventional path for your own health? Because the entire world, especially back then, would have been screaming at you to do the complete opposite and jump straight into the medical stuff.
well, in the 90s, I did. I mean, I did actually go
Right.
because that's where I was at the time. I went through the surgery, chemo, and radiation, and at the same time, I was thinking of this the other day when I was talking to somebody else about it, and I remember now that it was like I put myself into neutral, so I wasn't dropping into fear. Like I say, with the mindset, I wasn't dropping into fear, and I was going through the process, not from thinking, oh, they're going to fit. It's very difficult to sort of put myself back in that where I was then.
Mm.
And I still knew it was something to do with what I was doing. And, I was with other people who were going through something similar. There were like support groups. And there was a point where I thought, no, this isn't helpful to just keep talking about it all. And I knew there was something to do with going forward. So that was the, if you like, the unconventional part. And then as I, was looking at, the nature of reality, and I was like, why am I going for these checkups? What's that about? What if this is, if I'm in charge of things, and I knew by then enough to say, well, if I'm in charge of things, I'm in charge of things. So, because, and I actually remember this is something I recently keeps coming back. Somebody said, "Oh, what if it returns?" And even then, it was before. In fact, I think that was even before I started looking at the nature of reality. There was like, there's nothing to come back. There was something intuitive that just I knew it was a wake up call. It was a part of a process that was taking me on another stage of my journey. So I don't know what got me there because that was not part of my upbringing, my family, the background, none of that was uh, of the kind that would have made that a natural part of the process, a natural part of my journey. It was just something in me that decided, no, I don't need to keep going back. I know there's nothing to come back. So I wasn't in that fear and the checkups and all that stuff of which I think a lot of people do fall into. And I'm not to go, oh, look at me, it was part of my journey. Um, so that's the unconventional part that pretty early on I stopped being connected to that, as I say, going for checkups, being in fear, and really wanting to make these changes in my life that I mean, they were pretty large at the time. I didn't know where it was taking me. It's just I knew I had to do certain things. And so they are the actions that I took. And yeah, they're pretty unconventional because I did get some pushback when, when I was like, no, I've got to change, get out of the marriage. There was something I was like, I go, you're mad. I mean, from the outside, it probably looked like, what's wrong. But
Yeah,
from
but
the
only
inside,
you are living your life. No one else can live your life for
exactly,
you.
exactly. And that was part of the challenge, of course, for me to, no matter what anyone else was saying to me, it was up to me. So that was also part. I mean, there were so many parts, pieces of the puzzle that that you don't always see at the time. And I think it's good that you don't see it at the time because if you see the consequences, you know I might have made different decisions. So
Yeah.
you go through it and you're just there in it, and you make the decisions and choices. So yeah, we're taking our own journey. Everyone's a different journey, but so as I say, even though I did do the conventional route immediate sort of straight away, I then veered off into a somewhat different direction.
Oh, that's interesting. So I know you advocate for living as a free and individual man or woman. What do you think is the most common societal programming that, a man or a woman must unlearn to start to begin to live that way, particularly in regard to their own health?
Well, the first, I think it's twofold, really, although I mean, they're very much interconnected. But the first one is um, losing that belief that, doctors are the experts. And I know that's really, really hard because of, conditioning, but uh, to do that and then realize that while we're holding them as the authority, we're not taking responsibility for our own health. So it's the stepping out of the system and taking action to take responsibility for our own health. I mean, so as I say, it's sort of twofold, but very much interconnected. And I think there are there will obviously be many reasons. People have different reasons for why they trust the medical system, and a lot of it is conditioning. Um, could be fear of taking responsibility, could be just not trusting in themselves. I mean, there's loads of reasons. So I'm not saying just because people still hang on to the system that they're, this is not a fault blame thing. It's to say, these are processes of realizing that, I mean, once you start looking into it, that doctors are not informed, not trained about health. They are trained and taught about what to do with disease. And of course, they don't, you know, they don't understand about that as either, because the processes that they look at, they're looking at the body from the wrong perspective. So, it's just, there's a lot in all of that. But as I say, the first step probably is to say, start having a look at the medical system and realize that they are not as well informed about our bodies and health as they make out.
That's interesting. You encourage everyone to think deeply for themselves, and that's something I want people to do as well. What do you think is the single most common logical fallacy or weak point in the mainstream health narrative that you'd encourage a new person to look at first?
Well, probably the main logical fallacies, like I've just referred to, is the belief, the appeal to authority. Sorry, um, that's a standard one. So it does, put the authority, external to us. So and also the idea that there are experts who know better than us. Um, but in terms of certainly what's been going on the last like nearly 6 years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Is a fallacy called affirming the consequent, which goes it's if P then Q, Q therefore P. So in terms of the virus narrative, if a virus causes disease, I'll get ill. I'm ill, therefore a virus causes disease, and that just is not logical. I mean, there are others where say, oh, well, if it rains, my car will get wet. Oh, my car's wet, therefore it rained. Now, it's possible in that particular, the second example, it's possible that your car could be wet because it rained. But there are other reasons that your car could be wet. But at least that one is, rain could be one of the factors you might consider for why your car is wet. In the first one, there's so many other steps that need to be taken, which is, well, you've got to prove that a virus exists in the first place. And that's the big questioning. And I think that's a big problem, that people are stuck in these ideas and beliefs and not seeing that they are unproven, or not willing to see that they're unproven, because they're stuck in the, well, we're ill, therefore that's why it's we're ill, therefore viruses, with passing viruses. You go, no, there's no proof for that. And that's I mean, viruses aren't the only example of that particular fallacy, but but it's one that I think is appropriate for what we're living through, because the media, the medical system through the media, are still fear mongering about all kinds of so-called illnesses out there, and the whole virus thing, and there's so much attached to it, and because it keeps being pumped out, people say, well, it must be true because the media keeps telling us so.
Okay, the next question is interesting. I've written it down, but I want to rephrase it slightly. So I originally put, what is your personal process for verifying a claim, particularly when it contradicts nearly every mainstream media source? But I want you to talk a little bit, if you would, about there's a difference between claiming something or saying, actually, that's not accurate, because the burden of proof relies on the claimant, not on the person saying, I've got enough evidence here to say that's not true. I don't know what is true, but what you said isn't. Could you talk on that for a second?
Yes, I mean, that's such an important point, because anyone who questions something, you say, well, you prove it. Well, I don't have to prove the question. It's as you say, burden of proof is on those who are making a positive claim. So it's to be then careful how we address that, to make sure that we're not making positive claims that we can't back up with some kind of evidence. But there is science is about questioning and learning and developing and shifting ideas according to the evidence, not ignoring the evidence because we have to stay true to a particular theory, which is what's going on. And I mean, there are so many different, I think the rescue devices maybe is one of the phrases used for some of the ideas that they say, well, that doesn't fit the theory. Oh, yeah, but there's this something else that's happening which justifies them still saying it. I mean, like asymptomatic carriers, for example.
That's like an asymptomatic hangover.
Well, yes, especially since the definition of a disease requires the presence of symptoms.
Yep.
So you cannot have a disease if you don't have symptoms, by definition. At the same time, then they say asymptomatic infection, so you can be infected, and again, that still requires proof. So I think the way of doing this is more to ask questions. What is it? It's the phrase escapes me for the moment, but where just because you're questioning something, you don't have to provide a replacement. The idea that well, if you're saying it's not a virus, what is it? You've got to supply the answer.
No,
and
you don't.
You don't. What we're saying is that the evidence of what you're saying is not there. We've looked, and looking at some of the statements that are made with the medical system. I mean, so many other fields as well, where you have a look and say, well, that's the claim, and you can find contradictions and anomalies, which was one of they were things that I like to find, because when there's a contradiction or even one exception, if you can find one exception, then that rule that they're saying is a rule, it is under question at the very least. It doesn't mean it absolutely denies its existence or sort of discredits it. It's more that it's, well, hang on a minute, here's an exception, therefore your rule may not be a rule. It's to at least take that approach. So it is about asking questions and looking at the claims that are being made and looking for the supportive evidence for those claims, and to say, well, where is your, to ask them, where is your evidence for that particular claim? Well, this is, well, here's a paper that says X, Y, Z. Okay, look at the paper, especially the methods, and well, how did you come to that conclusion? And a lot of it involves jargon, which is, I know a lot of people, certainly within the medical research field, that would put people off. I mean, it puts me off because it's just a whole load of numbers, letters, and goodness knows what. And it's it's to be able to question that, to say just because that's what they're doing, what does it actually prove? Because when you know that the body is an interconnected organism, just because they're looking at these little bits and pieces, does that, how does that work within a whole organism? And there are so many parts to it as well. So a lot of it is chemistry, and the body is more than just chemistry, which I'm sure we'll come to as well. So I think not necessarily to be able to not take things at face value is the starting point when presented with a piece of information, air quotes, whatever it is, some kind of whatever it is, to say, okay, is that true? Instead of assuming it is true, and to see how important it is to your life as to whether it's worth looking into, but to be able to say that may or may not be true, and to be open to it, may not be true. As I say, it's just not necessarily taking things at face value is a starting point.
Sure, thank you. So, how do you go about distinguishing between legitimate science and the noise we find in a lot of the online echo chambers?
Oh, yes, legitimate science. Well, so,
Well,
again, yes.
what should be legitimate science, not what we're
Oh,
told is
right.
science. Yeah, where scientists, like you said before, ask questions, disprove current theories, and then go looking for what actually could be happening, and are willing to
Mm.
change their position rather than forcing the situation to fit what they want it to fit.
Well, I think the first point is if somebody's trying to make you do something or believe something, then you have to question that. That you're supposed to do something because we said so would always be a red flag. And also the like in the echo chamber, if the noise is all about fear,
Mm.
oh, they're going to do this, oh, they can do that. I'd say that requires some investigation, some questioning, because uh, so much is fear based. So if they're able to achieve um, something that is just fearful, full of fear, that they can encourage people to do things that they may not otherwise do. Um, so that they're my red flags, if you like, in what's going on in the echo chamber, um, and also knowing that the body is a brilliant organism, and beyond the body is who we actually are and what the body is and what we can do. So I think my grounding in that, or my kind of ongoing learning and developing my understanding of that, strengthens my spidey senses when I'm seeing something where it's just based on fear. Oh, they can do this. This is going to happen. For me, that just, as I say, is the red flag, to want to question. Well, what are they trying to achieve by putting this information out? So, in terms of what's real science, would be something that suggests, well, this is where we are at the moment, and we're, like you say, is that open inquiry into what is going on. But if there are any comments attached that say, well, because of this, you need to do X, Y, Z, you've got to do this, be this, do that, go here, don't go there, as I say, if there are demands attached to it, then that suggests that it's not necessarily open science rather than recommendation. So anything that takes away someone's ability to consent or otherwise to something or other. So if it's something that's forced out, it's pretty obvious where that is. And just being, I think you just, when you've been looking at all of this for so long, you get a sense of what is being put out in the wrong way. Now, again, there's new technology, and we were talking about technology before. So you get technology, that it's going to do this, it's going to do that. Well, maybe. I think maybe that's it. It's when it's put out as, prophesizing what is going to be. I think we need to, have some caution on that, and
Yeah,
to
I tend to
be
stick that
okay.
into a box called possible.
Yes, and say, okay, it's possible. Maybe it might. That sounds interesting, and I think that's often my approach. Is, that sounds interesting, and if I want to, I'll look into it and see whether that has any validation. Whether there's anything in that, whether it sounds useful. Again, whether it's useful or whether it's going to be potentially harmful. Um, you know, Yeah. Oh, and the phrase I was thinking of is falsification doesn't require replacement. That was the
Thank you.
phrase I
That's
was
a good
looking
one. I
for.
like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yes. So we can falsify something to say no, that's not proven,
Yeah.
or you know the evidence to prove that doesn't exist in the way we've been told.
Mm.
We do not have to provide a replacement, and that's what often people think. And no, we don't have to. But falsification is part of the scientific process. Is it falsifiable?
So another question. I'm gonna phrase it as if it was from me, but it's really aimed at people listening. So if I was facing a serious diagnosis, how could I ask intelligent, probing questions of my doctor, if I have one, without being confrontational and still maintain my own personal sovereignty over my own care? In other words, I'm responsible for me. How would you approach that?
Well, the first thing is disclaimer: I don't give advice. I don't give health advice.
There you go. That's exactly what I say.
Yeah, that's my starting point. I share information, and I say, okay, if that's useful, it's up to you, and help people make informed decisions. But the decisions are for the other person. It's not for me to. I do not, as I say, give advice.
I think if we could frame it from the idea of,
Yes.
if it was you, if you were in that situation, how
Yes.
would you approach it?
Yes. I mean, okay. The starting point is to ask questions.
Yes. Which means then you
And
need to develop a line of questions. So
yes,
develop your questions you're going to ask, I think.
well, if you are in a situation where you're at the doctor and they give you a label, or tell you have something. I just call them labels. But if you say, oh,
Yeah.
you've got, this is what you've got, that may, people may not have had the time to have developed those questions without that knowledge of what that label is. The first thing is to say, just because it's a label, um, please don't make it your identity.
Yes.
To recognize that it's a word that's used to describe a number of different symptoms.
Yeah.
And
By the way, it's helpful, I think, to think of symptoms as effects, not causes.
symptoms are effects. Yes, absolutely. They are not the disease or whatever that is. The symptoms are the effect of there's an underlying cause. And what I've found in my many years of research, and certainly with chronic conditions, that the medical system has very little understanding of the processes that lead to whatever it is, or the causes, or that they're still very much in the, oh, we're still looking into this, even though they do recommend air quotes treatments. So the first thing is to be able to feel comfortable in asking questions. So in a non-confrontational way is, the doctor kind of gives you this name. You say, well, can you tell me more about it? What is it? So doing it from a place of curiosity, not, oh, I need to know. Yeah, not from fear, but to say, well, I've never heard of that. What is it? Can you tell me more about it? And to then, if if you have the opportunity to go, and you're not being forced into doing something, taking something, to say, can I have some time to think about this and go away and do some research, start looking at it, talk to people. The research probably is not best looked at, and Google's not the best place, because you're only going to get the standard, the medical system's response. So if you know other people who are more open-minded, to just ask questions. But if you're in that situation, it is important not to be confrontational. And, I know it can be scary, and I fully understand that. And I got compassion when you're in a place where just, what's wrong? And they say X, Y, Z. Many people find relief in that label, because it's, oh, there was something wrong. So this now means I've, and I can see that there's a sense of, oh, I'm being heard, recognized. It's not just this weird thing that's going on. There's something. At the same time, that label doesn't identify you. So to ask, what the doctor knows about that particular condition, as I say, really asking questions where possible, and not from a place. And again, depending on where that person is, if they know a fair bit about health, not to say, well, that doesn't make any sense, or that's nonsense. That's just a label. You're not going to then have a good experience, a good relationship with your doctor, if that's where you want to be. So just being able to ask questions and see what information you can get from them, and go away and look at it, talk to people. And as you say, symptoms are an effect, and the effect may not just be physical. Sometimes symptoms present themselves for all sorts of reasons, the psycho-spiritual, mental, emotional, there are so many parts to this, like I was saying right at the beginning. It's not just, oh, something, your body's breaking down because it's malfunctioned or it's been attacked by something, that you've got to do. This is the whole language. And I know we're going to talk more about the language, but it's the whole language around, oh, I've got this, and then talking about it in terms of, my, whatever the label is. So there is no set way, but again, it's important, like you mentioned, to not be confrontational, to be, curious and see what information you can get, and be open to trusting yourself if something says, no, this doesn't feel right, as well. Because that's the other thing. The appeal to authority means I've got no say in this, whereas with all due respect, even though doctors have studied anatomy and physiology and all sorts of things, they do not know your body.
Yeah.
The only person who really knows you is you. And it's to bring back to ourselves, bring us back to ourselves, and trusting ourselves, and listening to ourselves, what's going on in our lives that may be presenting these symptoms that are an opportunity to look at something in our lives.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you. So we know that our body's symptoms are basically part of a very intelligent cleanup process. Your body wants to be well. That's what it's programmed to do, in my opinion, certainly. What do you think are the primary emotional and mental patterns, like stress, unresolved trauma, or perpetual worry, that you think the body's most frequently trying to eliminate for people? I mean, it's difficult because you can only speak from your own life, can't you? Like I can.
Yes, I mean, we kind of we started mentioning like suppressed emotions, and again, a lot, and again, it's I'm not going to make generalizations. I can't talk for everybody. I just know that because of conditioning and the way we've been brought up, the way society is, all these things that have been going on, that we are we are conditioned in certain ways, and there's an awful lot of suppressed emotions. Now, suppressed emotions, you think, oh, well, that's just in your head or whatever, and the stress, but that actually appears in the body, which is why, again, these chronic conditions are quite often the build up over a long period of time of a particular suppression of something
Mm.
because of what we were told, how we were treated when we were young. And again, it's not blaming those the caregivers. It's not, oh, it's their fault that I've, it's to understand that these are, these are patterns. So it's finding ways of, seeing what the pattern is of how we feel about ourselves because of something that happened in life, and what we can then do to break that pattern, to change that thought, and to realize that whatever that thought is or that belief is, that we've taken that on as our identity. And that then stays stuck in our system, and not just in the physical body, in the biofield, the torus field that is around us, because that's actually where a lot is stored. And it's connected, so it's not just the physical body. And I know this kind of might sound a bit woo, but it really isn't. Once you start looking into the biofield, that we are very much the result of an accumulation of ways of thinking and habits, conditioning.
Yeah, really, of the stories we tell ourselves. I said to someone the
Oh,
other day, my experience has been, I'm not so much experiencing my life, I'm experiencing the story I tell myself about my life.
yes, yes, and sometimes if you say, well, that's just a story. It's not. It's a story, as in, oh, you're telling a story. You're just making it up. It's not. But it is a story you're telling yourself, and you are telling yourself through your life. And the question is, well, is that true? And when you start looking at that story, well, is it true? Is that who you are? And that can be part of breaking the pattern. And I mean, in terms of suppressed emotions, if people, finding this difficult, I'd say look at the placebo nocebo effect.
Oh,
You
God,
know,
yeah. Medical hexing.
absolutely. And, people can have really good outcomes from sugar pills, and people can have negative outcomes from sugar pills. That's the nocebo effect. And, there's like Dr. John Sarno's work. He looked at back pain. He specialized in that area, and he discovered, and I can't remember the exact percentage, but it's something, I think it was around 70%. So, more than half of people who experience back pain are not do not have structural problems. So it's this is not a physical issue. It's not because you did something to your back. It's there's a suppressed emotion. So again, that's just another example. And also we know that different organs are associated with different emotions. So like the liver stores anger. So if there's an issue in the liver, then maybe people might want to have a look at where they're hanging on to anger, or where they're suppressed anger, or where there's anger in the parts that they are just sitting on, or if they may have anger issues, they may experience anger issues or anger with other people. There's still something that can affect the liver. Now, not necessarily that it's going to seriously damage the liver, but again, it could be where the symptoms may arise, shall we say, or there may be discomfort in that particular part of the body.
Yeah, there's actually a
And
chart for that, isn't there? An emotional kind of body correlation chart that's really interesting.
there are quite a few of those.
Yeah, I mean, spine,
It,
one of the first spine was lack of support or fear of change, feeling overburdened, inflexible, that kind of thing. So when you look at that chart, excuse me, it gives you a really interesting overview of things, because I've had, when talking with Matthew Zoltan, like I know you've been doing, That your body never forgets anything. The memory seems more physical than we realize in terms of not just up here, but in the body. So you can address pain and discomfort in the body and find out that there's actually some unresolved emotional trauma stored there. It fascinates me how this works. It's not just physical stuff. There's a whole load more going on.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, the back thing with support, I mean, that's obviously because your back, your spine is your support. So if you've got spine issues, you go, okay, there's something to do with support. I mean, and then this also ties in with Eileen McCusick's work. If anyone's familiar with, uh, she created the bio, no, founded the sort of biofield tuning. She created, no, what's the right word? Anyway, but that term, biofield tuning. And I mean, I was having a conversation with her yesterday and talking about where, within the field, but certain different parts of the body. And one of the things, like the right hip, if you've got issues with the right hip, it's to do with being busy. You're always busy, or do, and overdoing and that kind of thing. So the I mean, if people knew more about that kind of thing, they wouldn't rush to the doctor and get a hip replacement necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
They could look at this aspect and think, okay, my hip is, playing up this something wrong, it hurts. And to look at it from this other aspect and say, well, it's not to say that it won't be physical. I mean, it's possible. And at the same time, to say before you start going down any other routes, to look at these other non-physical aspects and say, well, is there something going on in my life that I can see applies to this, what is associated with that particular part of my body. So, if it's the right hip, am I being too busy? And
Yeah.
most people will be able to answer that question quite easily. So,
Yes.
yes, exactly. So it's recognizing that, symptoms are often a cry for help, and it's not necessarily just the body. The body is I would say mechanism. I don't want to use that word because it's like, it's not mechanism, but it's the process through which these emotions are expressing themselves to say, here's something to look at, please. There's something going on, and please, hello, and if you don't hear when it's at that quiet, the first steps, when it's sort of quieter, it might get a bit louder. So the symptoms may get stronger, and it's a question of learning. Again, back to what I was saying before about learning about your own body, to listen to it, to recognize it, to check in with it, to say, okay, is everything all right? What's, how do I feel today? Is a bit of tension here. Oh, okay. And to recognize it's not that there's something wrong, to say, okay, here's a message. What does that represent? Like left shoulder, what does that mean? Oh, okay, all right. There's some feedback there for you. Okay, right. I'll think about what that message is from my left shoulder and see how I can adapt where I am now to be kinder to myself, because this is all about learning self-care. So what message is that? How am I going to listen, and am I able to do something about it?
That's really good. Thank you. One of the things I found helpful too, and it was based on Matthew Zoltan's work, that I now at the end of the day, I take probably 15, 20 minutes before I settle down and go to sleep. And I just notice if there's any tension or discomfort, or I'm holding myself with tension anywhere in my body. And I found it helps to maybe touch it wherever the tension is, and just sit there and just wait to see, well, what's causing that? What happened during the day? And it may be a conversation or something happened or some frustration, and just sit there and let it process. And eventually the tension and the stuff goes away. And I found I sleep a lot better from that. So it's a good kind of end of day thing just to decompress, really. That works really well for me.
Yes, I mean that they're the kinds of practices to start to use to listen to your body, and as you say, especially at the end of the day, so that you can release anything you may be holding on to, because that could be part of what's disturbing sleep if there's still something unresolved. Yeah, no, I mean that's an excellent practice.
Yeah. On that line, then, could you think of maybe another simple practice, perhaps, breath work or an awareness technique that someone could use to clean their mental and emotional terrain once a day, rather like they might change something in the diet to clean the diet up a bit?
Um, Taking some time out, possibly during the day, to just sit, be, rather than the do, all the time. Um, Not necessarily to make an effort to think about things. In fact, if anything, to allow yourself not to think, to allow, as I say, to allow yourself to be, to relax.
Oh, sorry
To
about that. One of my lights just went out. Sorry. Sorry
Okay,
about that. Yeah.
not a problem. Um, and to learn to listen to your own body. That's all part of it. And I know it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but it is part of the learning process, is to learn about our own body, learn the messages it's giving us, learn how it to recognize how you feel, to see how you feel, and what may be going on, what may still be sitting there, without thinking about it if possible. But as you say, sort of, sit and allow the insight to present itself, as opposed to try and say, oh, what's going, because when you do that, you're going to start uh, scrunching yourself up, and then that's going in the opposite direction from relaxation. And to say, okay, that's there, what's okay, I'll sit with that, I'll just see and allow that. So it is spending time. I mean, being outside where possible, obviously, is always important. If you can take your feet, take your feet off, take your shoes off, so you can, so your feet can connect with the ground. It's like grounding. It's like, if there's sunshine, to be in the sun, to be. So it's not really one thing. It's really the more practice of bringing yourself back to being in the moment,
Mm.
without all the chatter that goes on more or less incessantly for a lot of us in our lives, and just taking some time out. um
Okay. Thank you. And you must have found that truth can often be met with anger. You've got a really interesting, expanded view of yourself and consciousness that seems to allow you to absorb criticism and disagreement without necessarily engaging in defensive responses. How did you come about that?
oh, that's just been a long learning process. One of the things is that when I was younger, I grew up around a lot of anger, which I never liked. And there was something I was like, this is.
Mm.
Now I kind of went the other way, and withdrew to a certain extent, and became more timid about it. So I've been learning, coming out of that, to be able to express. And I do my best not to absorb any kind of anger.
Mm.
If depends on the circumstance. If I feel it warrants a response, and at the same time, I'm learning it. These situations don't necessarily require me to respond. If I know how I've put out information, if somebody is triggered and becomes angry, that isn't my responsibility to fix their anger.
Mm.
Um, and again, you have to take each situation on their own merits, really. So it really would depend, but we can easily be drawn into all kinds of not even conversations, but all kinds of uh, interactions with different people that are not necessarily helpful. So
Mm.
again, have to gauge what the other person is either saying or writing or how it is, and if they're open to me expressing myself and saying how I see things. But if it's straightforward, um, you don't know what you're talking about, I'll walk past it because, okay,
You
you're
don't need to
entitled.
respond. Yeah.
You're entitled to your opinion.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you're right, but you're entitled to your opinion. And I'm not being arrogant. Oh, you're wrong, I'm right. I don't mean it in that way. It's more, if you, it's like I say, so you have to really look at each situation and judge it on their merits, and whether there's anything, and whether there's anything for me to learn from a particular interaction, because there could be something, a point that somebody's raising. You go, oh, actually, you've got a point there. Haven't looked at it from that way, for example. Or, well, I haven't looked at that particular aspect or something, and to be honest, but if it's straightforward belligerence, then okay, I move on.
Yeah, well, I think in terms of energy, is this going to increase and help the energy on both parties, or is it going to deplete? And if it's deplete, I don't really want to engage in it.
Well, precisely, and that's, as you say, my energy is precious. It's valuable for me, and do I want to lose it? Do I want to waste any of it? So again, depending on how that particular response or that comment or whatever it is, depending on where it is. Although I have to say, I mean, said lucky. I've been pretty fortunate that I haven't had too much. I mean, actually, funny. It was very early on. I think it was even May 2020 when there was an article. I can't remember. It doesn't matter where, that was challenging because the subtitle of "What Really Makes You Ill," why everything you thought you knew about disease is wrong, was challenged, and we were. I think I have a brief look at it anyway. That I was told that it was a pretty scathing article saying that how do we know how could we know what we're talking about because we're not, inverted commas, medically trained. So
Thank God.
well, yeah. So we didn't have that bias to get out of,
Didn't
and
have the
that's the
belief
point.
system.
Exactly, we weren't trapped in any kind of training that our whole future depends on believing in it. So
Almost sounds like a cult, Dawn.
oh yeah. Well, yes. I mean, and that's one of the earliest books we came across was, or I certainly came across Confessions of a Medical Heretic by Robert Mendelssohn, and he likened the medical system to. A faith to a church. He's like, to a religion, sorry, called it the Church of Modern Medicine, because you have to believe in it. And seeing that again, that was really early on in the research. And this was from a medical doctor, and he was saying, have to believe in it. You think, well, hang on a minute. He's saying you have to believe in it. Well, no, it shouldn't be about belief. It should be about science. So once, that's all part of it. But certainly that was a very important book right at the very beginning to say, well, hang on, this is a medical doctor criticizing it. So again, that's why a lot of, well, I think pretty much all the people who we cite in the book are medically trained people to say, look, these are people who were trained and they still were able to see it differently and be critical and say there's something wrong, depending on what particular aspect of the medical system, because some were saying certain parts and exposing certain parts, but we're agreeing with lots of others. So we were just going, well, they're exposing this part, which was their area of specialism. So we say, okay, well, they've looked at it and they've said, so I knew I wasn't making any of this up. It was backed by other people who were saying the same thing. And when you look into the history, the history, these questions go back a long way. So I think having spent such a long time studying it, researching it, gave me the confidence to, I mean, and even that was, sort of in the early days, probably not, well, it's not where I am now. I mean, that's still developed. It was not as strongly developed as it is now, but and at the same time, I'm still open to, if something comes up that says something different, I'll look at it. I'm not saying, oh, I'm right. I know certain things are the way they are, and will, I'm happy to look into other things. I know there are question marks. I think that's the point. So I know that's going around the going around it. It's still I I I don't like confrontation, so I won't.
It's not necessary.
That's no. Well, there's some people like, oh, let's get in there and I'll show them, and it's like, no,
It's funny. People say that about me, and I really don't. I can't stand it. But the reason I go in as hard as I go in sometimes is so I can nip it in the bud and finish with it quickly. Otherwise, it bothers me. But yeah, it's a confrontation. Really, if you're an emotionally grounded and balanced adult, you can have a conversation with anybody on any topic, even if they disagree with you, and still have a discussion. It doesn't have to drop into anything else.
Yes, I've recently had two discussions with people who have a different view about contagion and infectious diseases. Now, they're not like totally in the mainstream. They are somewhat sort of out, not outside, but on the edge. Or one was one a little bit further, and yet we still had a conversation, and we were questioning, and there was no antagonism. There was no nastiness. No. Who do you think you are? Because they were both qualified people, qualified in their particular area, and one even had it, working in the infectious diseases department. It was a PhD or something. But again, we still had a conversation. I mean, you know, so it is possible. And as I say, I've had some of those recently, and I regard them also as opportunities for me to develop my ability to explain my position and to be open to seeing, well, okay, are there any parts of this that I still need to look at in more depth? Because again, I mean, one of them was a conversation of somebody saying about using a bioresonance machine that was showing up, inverted commas, viruses on. And I said, well, that will be dependent on the whoever's programmed that particular machine
Get
to
away.
give. Yeah. Um, so I mean that was my response, and I thought, well, actually, yeah, okay, could be. And so it's like, what are they? I can't. I don't know, because I don't know what the program is and who, what the manufacturers, how they determined that particular resonance was related to a particular virus. I don't know that. What I know is that the viruses, as we've been told they are, have not been proven to exist. So they are. What is that machine showing in that particular resonance? I mean, I'm not saying that there might be something going on in the body, but it's the interpretation again, and going back to the language and the labels and how what's being told, what's being said, what is being interpreted.
Good. Thank you. I've got another question, kind of looking more to the future now. If we reversed the paradigm and put consciousness, sovereignty, and terrain first, what is the single biggest social program or institution you think would become obsolete? And what could you see replacing it, which hopefully wouldn't be another program or institution?
But surely government is at the top of the list. I mean, I don't want to get rid of the whole medical system, 100%, because there's still, that part of it for accident and emergency, that's still relevant. But that requires some updating on the information as to how they treat patients or how they look after patients post, for recovery purposes, post surgery, that kind of thing. I would also, yeah, I mean, a lot of surgeries aren't necessarily necessary. Um, it's to remove top-down systems that impose control on other people. So what would it be replaced with? Well, a more I don't know. The having a system where people who do understand what's going on, so that we have true leaders, as in, people who are able to lead people, if not, by example is one thing, through understanding and knowledge, imparting information, and leading as opposed to controlling. I mean, there is a big difference, and a true leader will, lead from the front, but isn't necessarily on. So it's not a hierarchical system. At the same time, everyone has a different role, so there are, recognizing everyone's part in the whole process. So there will be people who have more knowledge on a particular level. I mean, like you are, very, it's like mechanically minded, so you can, get into
Fix
looking
stuff.
at fixed stuff. Yes. Don't ask me to do that. That's not my, forte in any way, shape, or form. It's just, so yeah, you'd be the leader in the fixing section, if you like. So it's recognizing that we are all, which is great, because we want to be all different. We don't want to all be the same. So no, it wouldn't be a system. It would be people working together. Hey, cooperation, and
What, you mean
taking
like all parts of a body working together to make the body whole?
something like that. Yes,
That'd be
because I
interesting.
mean, you go, well, although the brain doesn't do what we think it does, but it's like, but still, that the head is the top of the body, and when you're walking, like your legs are leading you. So it's not it's not getting hung up on the language of different things. But again, yeah, don't ask your hand to do what your leg or your foot does, because your hand, you can't. Well, I think some people can write with their feet and paint and draw, which is absolutely stunning. And it shows what we can do, in different circumstances. And the more we're looking into the, nature of consciousness and different things, that we're learning just how much we have been kept from understanding who we are and what we can do. But this is all opening up now. So we, the whatever it was, would have exploration in and looking and learning from the perspective of consciousness, not just the physical body. So it's understanding mind, body, and spirit work all together, if you like. But no, it wouldn't be a system.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Looking at the trajectory of your work, what are you currently spending your time and energy on investigating? What direction are you heading, Dawn?
Well, I suppose my kind of area is synthesizing new information and putting it together to see a clearer picture. So like picking up jigsaw pieces and starting to see how these things fit together. So bringing, if you like, the health and consciousness pieces together and showing how consciousness, through consciousness, we are, if you like, to a certain extent, kind of creating the body in the moment, which I know sounds a bit weird, but moving into understanding it and how to explain that, because it's not just about health, how our body is, because it's then opens us up to learning more about what we can do in this as a human, in this life, in this physical life, because it's far less restricted than we've been told now. I mean, there are, certain ways that it functions. At the same time, they're nowhere near as restricted as we've been told. So it lets, open up the boundaries and keep moving the boundaries away so that we can see what is possible. So it's really, as I say, looking at various areas that may sound a bit weird, like, near-death experiences, and how that shows that, there is more to us than this physical form, which I, I'm extremely comfortable with. I feel that, I feel that that's right. And how can that help us in our everyday lives? Now, one example, like Anita Morjani, who was effectively, at death's door, had a near-death experience and came back and recovered. So her she was effectively ridden with cancer, and she's still alive and talking, and she's healthy. That she came back and she recovered. So that opens up so many possibilities of, well, hang on a minute, that means that we can do something with our bodies, which is why I like that idea that they're that we are that the non-physical aspects of health problems, because when we recognize that, we don't just say, oh, it's a gene, it's a germ, it's something that got us, it's a thing, it's a physical thing, oh, I did this and did my back, and that there's something else behind that. And when we explore that further, then we can learn what we can do about it to be healthy and strong. And again, because I know that's something that you look at as well, in terms of, because I'm getting older, and well, that doesn't necessarily mean deterioration. Okay, so what can I do to help support that belief and then become stronger and healthier and more vibrant in my ongoing years? What can I do to support that without doing the, oh, I'm getting old stuff? Because, I don't
Which
believe in
comes
that.
back to the story you're telling yourself. It's so powerful, that, because your beliefs shape your life.
Absolutely. And it's being able to say, okay, well, if that's the case, then what can I do? So yeah, what is possible? So, is it possible? And so that's the piece, like the near death experiences, and where people have something changes in them through either some kind of experience like that, and then that means they can shift their body. So that allows us to get rid of beliefs, a whole load of beliefs of what is fixed, deterministic type of story that we're given. And as you say, I mean, not that I believe in that anyway, but as you say, it is the stories, and to sit there and think, okay, well, what story am I telling myself about this particular situation? And is that it's Byron Katie, is that true? Is that true? Is it an actual truth? Oh, well, I believe it, but a belief isn't truth. And there's there's oh, Henry Ford. So I think it's whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right. So let's believe we can. That's the starting point. So when you believe you can and then you can, that reinforces your understanding of who you are, and then that strengthens your ability to do things, that then changes your beliefs. And so it's an ongoing circle, but it also can go backwards. If you believe you can't, then you won't, and that'll reinforce a particular belief system about who you think you are. So it's getting to that, coming out of this conditioning, which is, has been the kind of topic of the last couple of talks I've given about, just how conditioned we are. And I know I still am, obviously. And it's not to say, well, exactly, it's not to say, oh, I've done it all. Well, if you've done it all, what else is there to learn? So it's like, oh, no, there's still more, because there's still life and there's still more knowledge, and let's open up to see what we can do. So I think it's more in that direction of seeing what's possible, and like things like the telepathy tapes have been incredible in opening up our understanding of what can be done. Blindfold reading, all those kinds of things are just wow. And it's not just children who can do that. So amazing, fascinating. Yeah, this is my area of wow. This is interesting.
I'm going to ask you one final question, then I won't take any more of your time. I've noticed that you've become much more full of care and deliberate with your language and language patterns. Why is that?
Well, because belief, influence reality. And how do we know what our beliefs are? Well, those beliefs come through words. And not that the words are fixed, but again, if you say, well, I believe that XYZ, or I am this, or I am that, then that's going to take you to experiences that are supportive of those particular belief systems. So um, again, it's because of the English language being of the type that says I am XYZ, whereas other languages say I have, like, so we would say things like, again, being careful to say that because I don't want to give that instruction to my body, but things like I am angry, for
Yeah.
example, whereas other language would say I have anger. Now, when there's a difference in the charge to those two phrases, and how, because again, like I was saying with labels in terms of conditions, health conditions that people are given, if we take that on in our identity, then our body will take that in, and it will reinforce that, and that will manifest, because that's our words. A lot of people are learning, words. We learn to spell. Yes. Yes. Interesting. I was quite good at spelling at school. So, but again, the power of language, and we casting spells. That's the meaning of abracadabra. As I speak, so I create. So we are creating through our language, through our words, and so I am becoming more aware of the words I'm using, partly as a feedback system to say, oh, okay, I still think that if I'm using that for myself, and oh, okay, that's still there, or something to look at. And again, when I'm talking to other people, just to hear what they're saying, and you know suggest maybe, and certainly with conversation with friends, non conversation, to say, um to reflect back to them what they've said, and again, that's what these conversations are for, to mirror, it's a feedback system. If somebody's saying something, and to be aware of that somebody else is a feedback mirror for us, and we're a mirror for them, because we are, all connected. So these are all opportunities to learn. So again, with it's again, it's not about being so stressed, oh, I used the wrong word. It's to be aware, like, oh, okay, that word came up. It's to be curious about, right, how do I feel about that? I've just, where does that thought come from? Is that helpful? Where does that come from? Can I release that? And allow yourself to move through a process of releasing this, again, the story. Because how do we tell stories? We tell ourselves stories in words, so we use words to create the stories. And knowing that they're words, you go, well, yeah, again, it goes back to that, are they true? It's a story, and these are the words. So if that's the story that I'm holding on to, can I rewrite my story? Let's use some different words. And it's not about positive, negative. It's more a question of, what would I like to create in my life? Because, the whole thing of manifestation, that we are manifesting all the time anyway. It's when we are more conscious of what we are doing, and the way we're using our words, and the way we are particularly interacting with other people. Because it's all very well to be, love and light, and then hate somebody because they say something you don't like. That's, and so it's again spotting the contradictions and things, and being, yeah, just being aware, of knowing, um and it's fine to, to have a reaction. Well, again, yeah, and it's to recognize if you're reacting or responding to something somebody's saying, and if you're reacting, to realize that somebody has said something that has created a particular feeling inside. So to sit with it, and to be able to hear what words come from that. so you can see what that belief is attached to, what story is attached to it, so you can release it and then say, well, is, is that part of now? And is that benefiting me? And what can I do about it? And because, as I say, it's all learning and becoming the best version of ourselves in each moment,
That's
as I see
interesting.
it.
If I could, thank you. If I could add one thing to the bit we said about I am versus I have, that a statement of identity, I am this, I am that, they are probably, from what I've read and what I've learned, the highest ones, because they're stating who you are, and it's very hard to go against what you say you are. So, for example, if someone said, I'm a smoker, it's very difficult just from that statement to not smoke. I don't smoke's not strong enough. If you said, I am not a smoker, then that's a much easier one to live with as an example. So I'm very careful in my life about what I say I am and then follow it with.
Well, yes, and there are some, and I've heard that fairly recently, that say your body wouldn't necessarily hear the not. So even to say I'm not a smoker,
Yes, you got to stay positive. It's like children. You don't say don't jump in the puddle because they hear jump in the puddle and go do it.
mm, yeah, yeah. So it's the
Affirm the positive.
but yes, and again, it's not this kind of airy fairy positive, but it's more to make as you say, something you are happy to put into your body. So it's an energy you're putting into your body, and as you say, when you identify it with it, it's then saying that's who you are, and that's by no means who you are. That's why I don't like any labels.
It's just an aspect of you.
Yes, precisely, and because we do. I mean, if people are aware, the different areas where they talk about parts work, and that we have many parts of us playing different roles, and it's appropriate. It's not that there's a bad thing. There are times when we need to stand up and be um, strong and positive, and there are other times, where we might want to um, be somewhat softer or whatever. And it's okay to have these differences. It's more when there's a one dominating all the rest, maybe, and not allowing these different aspects are all part of us. It's like having different characters.
Yeah, you can think of archetypes, like
Yes.
warrior, and so many people I know get really kind of stuck in warrior mode. And that doesn't necessarily give you access to the resources that, the magician would have within you, or the lover would have within you, or the sovereign, or whatever other archetypes you want to pick on. So as you move through this journey, I've been fortunate enough to get better at saying what would be the most appropriate personality or archetype in me to actually achieve what I want to achieve right here and right now, and then work from that place, put myself in that state, that place, and then work at it from there. And you get a completely different result than if you come at it from one of the less appropriate ones.
Yes, and also to recognise that okay, it's appropriate to bring forth the warrior. I mean, it's understandable that many people have been in their warrior mode for the last 6 years because of everything that's been exposed, everything they've learned, and realising they've been lied to and everything else that's been going on. This is anger is absolutely appropriate. It's like I'd be surprised if anyone wasn't angry when they find out what's been going on. So they, that's part of it. It's to recognize, not to stay in anger, to say, okay, well, let's work through that, and so the warrior is, so you can understand, with the anger of what's been going on, to stay in the warrior and to go, I'm not going to have this, and to allow it to say, okay, no, it's time for warrior to back down, because that can be exhausting.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And to allow
you
the
can't run at that
magician.
level. Yeah.
No, and also I mean, it's a good point to recognize that we all have the magician inside us as well, and say, okay, let the magician come out and play. And to say, because even in our language, you say, oh, well, part of me wants to do this and part of me doesn't. We kind of say that and go, yeah, that's okay. And it's then how you resolve that, choice, and remembering it's always a choice. So yeah, kind of allowing different parts to play and recognizing that it's all appropriate in the moment, and to be not identifying that with any one of those parts, except in that moment when it is the part to be to be at the forefront in that particular moment, because that's the best way to have that interaction, or the best way to interact with whatever the condition is, or whatever the situation is.
Dawn, that was one of the nicest conversations I've had in such a long time. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. I know we've covered quite a lot, so hopefully it's been helpful to people. And I'm still in my learning process, so thank you so much.
Thanks, Dawn. Don't go away.